Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Lewis Pike Show. It has been a few weeks or maybe several months since we've dropped a podcast, so I wanted to do a little bit different style of podcast, and I'm going to, as I mentioned earlier in past episodes, I'm going to have more guests on the podcast, and today I think you guys are going to enjoy this, and so we're going to jump into it. I have actually a good friend of mine that I've known for quite some time. I want to say almost 10 plus years, if not more.
It's been more than 10 years.
Yes, it's been more. I always lose track of time. It seems like it's only been a few years, but yeah, man, it's been a while. So I have Jerene, Makia.
I knew you were gonna mess it up.
And I just messed up his last name. The funny story is,
good. After saying you've been knowing me for 10 plus years.
I'm gonna edit that out. Nah, I'll actually keep that in.
That's good, honestly. It's all good.
So I have Jerene on the podcast, and we're going to talk about. He has an interesting story. I knew him from back in our college days, but he's actually married to actually a high school friend of mine's sister, who I've known for, I don't know, maybe longer. So I met Jerene through her, and it was a funny story how we met, actually playing video games, which I used to do a lot of, wasting time. And we've connected again, like we've always kept in touch, but we really connected here the last year and a half, just about like my entrepreneur journey and, you know, what he's been doing outside of his professional career. So, Jerene, you just want to give a little bit of background of kind of gets people up to speed to where you're at, and then we'll jump into kind of the
Yeah, sure, man. Thanks for the introduction. Like Lewis said, man, we met in college. And it's really interesting because in college we were cool, but we weren't, the type of friends that hung out every day. It was more, in passing, we would see each other speak, say what's up.
Exactly.
And then later on in life, I started to kind of follow Lewis's professional career. And it pretty much coincided with some of the steps I was taking. We're both from a very, very small area. We both moved away. He ended up moving to Austin. I ended up moving to Dallas. We're from Arkansas. So that was kind of my early beginnings. But in terms of my development along the way, it went from, okay, I just really, really want to make as much money as possible and move up this corporate ladder, to, okay, I don't really think this 9-to-5 thing is for me, or at least not 100% for me. Mm-hmm. What other avenues can I get into to, if nothing else, diversify, but at the best case scenario, completely walk away. And also, I was married to somebody who is a fellow dreamer. So she had this crazy idea, why don't we pick up, move, sell everything, and relocate to New York City with no money.
Yes.
And that's what really fueled everything that happened over probably the last 3 or 4 years of my life. So, that's kind of how I progressed. I was a finance major in college, so I went on to do pretty much financial-based jobs ever since. And I'm currently a finance director for an insurance-related company out in the New Jersey area. So that's kind of my 9-to-5 work, but the real estate journey is one that I'm here for. And so we'll probably get into that here pretty soon, but I just wanted to give you some background about me.
Awesome. Yeah, I appreciate that. And to give you guys just a little bit more context, like me and Jerene are both from a small town, small towns. Yeah, small towns in Arkansas. I'm from a small town, but he's from an even smaller town of Arkansas. If you can imagine, just the ruralest, like smallest parts of Arkansas, that's probably where I'm from. And then just imagine just like the middle of nowhere, and you're probably getting closer to where he's from.
Just to put things into context for your viewers, I literally had cows in my backyard. So, like when people say they're from small towns, there are levels to small towns. Like I literally used to walk outside, walk to the backyard, and point and moo at the cows, and that was where I started. So to go from that to, working in downtown Manhattan at one point in my life, it was such a huge difference from where I grew up. But Lewis knows. He understands.
Yeah, it's I can totally relate. And it's funny, like, you mentioned that you guys moved to New York, and I always thought that was a huge move because you guys were fairly young when you guys made that decision. I mean, not too long after, you guys have moved to Texas, and you guys were, doing a traditional path where you get your careers kicked off, you buy your first property, you get married, like you guys are going around that path, and then all of a sudden it's just boom, hey, we're going to New York. And I think,
360, whatever it was.
I think everybody's like, wait a minute, like you guys are going down this path, and like, where we're from, like, 22, 23, 24, like, you should have 2 or 3 kids by now, and like, yeah, there's no time to go chase your dreams. Like, you old, it's time to be an adult.
You just happy if all of your kids are with the woman you married to now. You made
it. Exactly. And they had what you call the typical from where from, like the good life. Like they made it. They was there. Like they both had good jobs. They were in a good city. They were doing something they liked. Like, yeah, let's get this thing started. Like, why mix things up and move to New York? So I knew from there, like, he was like, that really like motivated me and let me know, like, man, like, he's different. Like, we kind of think alike. And it's funny, like, just here recently, like when we started connecting more and actually talking more, that we finally started to realize, like, man, like we think alike in terms of like, how, like we're grateful for where our 9 to 5 and our careers have gotten us, but we realize that, hey, like we've made it this far, but like there's something more out there that we can do. There's a bigger impact that we can do. There's more ways that we can do besides just working at a desk job for 30, 40 years, retiring, and then, living off our retirement and trying to travel the world and stuff while we're old. We were like, no, like there's other things that I can be doing to bring in money. And that brings us into kind of the topic of this conversation, because I've left if you guys have been following me for a while, you guys know I left my 9 to 5, maybe it's going on almost 2 years. And I'm in a situation now where I'm making really good money, more than what I was making in my 9 to 5. So I'm looking at ways like, hey, like I've done that, but like, where do I put this money? Where do I invest it? And that brings us to the subject now. Like, I talked to you guys about money and how to get out of debt and how you can grow wealth. But this is one of the areas that I'm interested in, is real estate. And yes, I didn't know, even though we knew each other, I didn't know that Jerene had started this journey already a few years ago on his real estate path. So he started talking to me about it. So Jerene, if you want to just kind of get into that, segues us into how did you get into real estate investing, and like, what made you go down that path?
Yeah. So this was the thing, 2 things. So I kind of accidentally got into real estate the first time, and the second time it was very purposeful. So the first time, Lewis brought up the point that we were living in Texas. So my wife and I actually did buy our first home, and we were living the quote unquote American dream at 24. And it scared us to death because we thought we were just going to die in suburbia. And so when we sold everything, that included the house that we were living in. And I didn't make the connection then that you can make money selling houses, because we bought this, starter home in this cookie cutter neighborhood. And then a year and a half later, ended up selling it for a small profit, nothing life-changing by any means, but it didn't click then that you can make money buying and flipping houses or holding them for appreciation, any of that type of thing. But because we moved to New York with very little money, everything we made in the sale was gone within the first 5 months. So that was like start over, start from scratch. So that didn't really go far. But what happened was I actually had been really, really trying to figure out how to build wealth, how millionaires build wealth. And just like almost 99% of investors, I read Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And the stuff that was in that book was just eye-opening to me. I read it once, then I read it again, and I was in the middle of reading it for the third time. And I was like, I gotta do something. Like I have to invest in a property. And oddly enough, I was in a barbershop and a real estate investor who was pretty big in the area. He'd been doing a lot of fix and flips throughout the northern New Jersey area, was actually in the barbershop getting his haircut, talking about a deal that he had just finished and saying that he was working on another deal. So I was just in the seat waiting on my haircut, going through this mental gymnastics of like, do I say something? Do I not say something? If I do, what do I say? I don't know any of the terms. I just read this book and I know I need to do this, right? But you know, I actually just kind of jumped in and said, hey, I'm interested in investing. I don't really know what I'm doing. And that, you know, I will say this to new investors, kind of short segue, but honesty is your best policy, man. You know, you come across people that try to pretend like they know what they're doing, and it doesn't help you. It doesn't help the person that you're trying to invest with. Like, be upfront and say, hey, I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm willing to learn. And I am very, very driven to do this the right way. So that's kind of the approach I had. And it was a very huge blessing in disguise, because he ended up kind of taking me under his wing, showing me some of the steps to make. But even more than that, offering me the potential and the opportunity to follow through with those steps that he was coaching me on. So that's actually where my training began, was from this barbershop conversation. And from there, you know, within 3 months, I was actually scrounging up every dime I could, and actually getting some student loan debt to help me pay for this first property. So we'll dive into that. But that's kind of how I started. I you know, was really trying to figure out what to do next, and found a mentor.
I think that's key. I mean, I think you brought up some good points. Is like, and you know, like a lot of times, like it's hard to admit or accept that like we don't know as much as we know, especially when jumping into a new field. Like sometimes it's hard to take a step back, and I think you knowing that, hey, like this is something I want to do, but I need to get with someone or get with a mentor that actually knows how to do it. And like I tell this to people all the time. They're like, what's the biggest investment you make in like yourself or your business? I'm like, you know, the biggest investment you can make is one in yourself, but two, like investing in a mentor and like investing in someone that has been there, that has done it. Because you know what, you may be thinking like, oh, I don't have money to put into it. I don't want to put money into, you know, getting someone else, but it's going to save you a lot of money and a lot of time. And, you know, in the long run, or just in short term of getting started. Since you brought that up, like I just wanted to ask the question: if you hadn't found that information, I know you read the book, and a lot of people read the book and they're like, you know, how do I get started, or where do I begin? Do you think you would have jumped into real estate eventually when the time you done it, if you hadn't had that mentor around?
Man, I 100% think it would have taken me longer to get into real estate. And that's just because, you know, buying a house is a huge deal. Like, you know, there's no way to sugarcoat it. You know, you're paying $100 to $500 to $1 million on one individual property. And if you don't know what you're doing, the fear of losing that money will keep you from getting in the game, right? So for me, it was so important to find somebody who could show me the ropes. And that's another thing. You know, everybody brings something to the table. In a mentor-mentee relationship, you both have to bring something to the table. Otherwise, the relationship won't work, or you don't even need to be in that relationship. So, and I wrote another post about this, and that's probably for a whole nother conversation, but just to highlight that, I wrote something about the 5 steps that every newbie investor should take. One of those is finding a mentor, but another one was knowing what value you can bring to people, right? So the thing that I did have going for me, you know, coming from a finance background is I understood the numbers. So as soon as I started learning about real estate, the numbers jumped out at me like, this is the way. This is better than any other retirement plan I could think of, right? So,
Yeah.
so that I knew. Also, I kind of knew what my own financial position was. And even though I didn't have much money in the bank, I knew I had decent credit. I had done some stuff to get pre-approved. So I knew what kind of a house I could afford and how much I could afford.
I think,
go ahead.
not to cut you off, but I think that's probably a good segue into, like, you know, we talked about like your motivation and why you got started into real estate. Maybe we can segue now into like the deal. Like, let's walk us through the deal, like how you picked the house, like why you chose this house. Maybe walk us through the numbers from a high level of like why you chose this particular property.
Yeah, definitely. So one of the reasons why I chose the property that I chose was because it had cash flow from day one. And so one of the main things that my mentor taught me, and that Robert Kiyosaki talks about in his book and many others, is you don't buy a deal on speculation. You go into any real estate investment understanding how much cash you're putting up and how much monthly cash flow you can make from this property. And if there is no monthly cash flow involved, especially for the early stage people, that's not a good deal. Like appreciation is gambling to some degree because you never know if that's going to come to fruition, right? So I picked this property for a few reasons. One being that it was a 3-family property, and that means a 3-unit property where there are tenants on each floor. Especially in the northern Jersey area, the Philadelphia area, you'll find these kind of houses all over the place. They're way less common in the South, but in the North, they're all over the place. And the benefit of a property like that is any property between 1 to 4 units is treated like a single family home on paper. So you can get the same FHA loans, which are kind of the cheap Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac loans that the government issues that, you know, will allow you to put down a 3.5% down payment as opposed to a 25% down payment. Well, I didn't even have 3.5%, so I definitely wasn't going to be invested in anything with 20 and 25%. So that instantly made my decision making a lot more concise because I only had a short pool of properties to work with anyway. So that was part of it, was the types of terms I could get from a lending perspective. And then also the fact that it was a 3-unit property meant that I could get this house at a 3.5% interest rate, live in one of the units, and essentially live for free.
Yes.
And that is a huge benefit to anybody who's a brand new real estate investor. Even if you don't believe in real estate investing, just in life, if you're in a position where you can live somewhere and have other people paying your mortgage payment for you, by all means do it. All means. There's a book called, I forget the name. It's by Scott Trench. What is that book? It'll come to me. It'll come to me. It's been on the tip of my, I've been telling everybody about the book. Look up Scott Trench and there'll be a book that comes up. And we'll probably put them in the show notes too.
Yeah, we'll definitely throw them in the show notes.
But it's basically that concept where, you know, I found this 3-unit property. I could buy it for a very low down payment. I could live in one of the units and completely cut out my rent payment that I was making every month, which essentially was just going to be more money in my pocket. So those were the reasons why I picked the property that I picked. And the reason why I was actually able to get started was because my mentor bought, fixed up, and sold those exact types of properties.
Gotcha.
So he already had the product and he was willing to show me how to get into the product.
So to recap a little bit about the deal. So one, you started with making sure that it was a cash flowing deal from the beginning. Like you weren't looking at deals that weren't going to have an immediate cash flow. And that just means after all the expenses are paid, the mortgage, all the bills is paid, that you're getting some money back into your pocket each month.
Yes.
The next thing is that you were looking for something, primarily, you know, a duplex or a triplex or, you know, a 4-unit property, that maybe potentially that you can move into one of the units and you can save on paying rent, and the tenants will pay the mortgage down, and that essentially that saves you money too, because I don't know what the rent range is in the you know, the New York area, but I imagine it's not cheap. Yeah, so just going off here in Austin is pretty expensive. So that's a good way to look at it as well. And then just making sure that the numbers work as far as the financing as well. I know you mentioned like a FHA loan, like having that, you know, being able, if you're being able to get that option. Is that something that's available for like first time buyers, or how does that 3.75% FHA loan, how does someone qualify for that if they're just getting started?
Yeah. So the way it works, and it's a 3.5%.
Got you.
3.5% interest rate. But and before I even answer that, the name of the book is Set for Life.
Set for Life.
Set for Life. Everybody read that book. Especially if you're, you know, under 35 and have some flexibility. Read that book. But to answer your question, the FHA loans do have some specific requirements. Mm-hmm. So one of those requirements is that you have to purchase the property with the intention of living there. Now, you don't have to live there forever, but you have to live there to start, right? Okay. Essentially, at least like a year is kind of what's suggested. And it's called house hacking. And people do it all the time, where they buy one property at a low entry fee, stay in that property, raise the value of that property through fixing it up here and there. Especially if they're in a hot market, they know that it will appreciate. And then as your equity builds, and equity just meaning the additional money that is baked into that property, as that number rises, then you get to the point where you can refinance out of that FHA loan, convert it to a conventional loan, and then you can move out and start over. You can do that 10 times in a row if you want to.
Gotcha.
So that's the game plan that I had going in. Mm-hmm. And if you want to dive into the actual numbers behind that property, then we can go that route, and I can tell you the specifics.
Yeah. I think that'd be good to walk the listeners through the actual numbers of it. Okay. And just for clarification, guys, this is the very first property that he's invested into that we're walking through this process.
Yeah. So property one. So the actual price of the property was $350,000. Mm-hmm. And I know that sounds like a huge number, and so, you know, especially to any of the newbies out there that are like, that's too much house, I don't qualify, you know, I wouldn't be able to get into that house. One of the other benefits of, you know, some of these multifamily units is that the actual rent payment from the other tenants offsets the mortgage expenses on paper. So you actually can qualify for more of a purchase price than you could if you were buying a single family home. So if you make $50,000 a year, and you might only qualify for a $250,000 home, because you're purchasing a property that has rental income, you could actually qualify for more of, you know, 350 or 400, whatever the case may be, based on your situation, and that does help you with that.
Because basically a lender's looking at that as income, right? Like they're counting that as part of your income, essentially.
Exactly. So the property purchase price was $350,000, and it was a market value deal. And I say that because a lot of people come to real estate thinking that you can't even buy a property unless you're getting it at this huge discount, and, you know, you're doing all this work on it. Absolutely not. I mean, yes, the more sophisticated you get and the more opportunities you find, you want to get those properties that you can force the appreciation through fixing it, through upgrading it. But I tell any new investor, if the numbers work, the numbers work. And mm-hmm. So I had no problem spending market value on a property that had been completely renovated, no CapEx expenses that were on the horizon, brand new roofs, brand new hot water heaters. Everything was ready to go. So I felt way more comfortable going into a situation like that, simply because it was easier and because I didn't know how to fix the stuff anyway.
Yes.
So, so it was a no-brainer for me. But the property cost $350, and with that FHA loan, I only had to put down $12,500 to move into a $350,000 asset.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, that definitely makes the risk, or makes the number seem a lot more attainable doing it that way.
Exactly. Because, my counterparts who may have already had a single family home, with an FHA loan that they were already living in, you're coming to the table with, 90 grand in order to get that same property that I just purchased for $13,000.
Yes.
So, that in itself is a huge use of leverage in a positive way. And especially where I was in my career and in my life, even getting the 12, 13 grand was a little bit tougher. So I ended up having to, work with my wife, who was in school at the time, get a pretty big student loan payout, and use that to help facilitate that down payment. So that was my starting point.
So walk us through. So you guys, you got the house, and you used part of your wife's student loan payment and some cash in order to put the down payment down in order to get the property. So walk us through now. When you bought the property back in 2015, correct?
2015. Yep.
Got you. So walk us through now, like how is that investment paid off for you now, since you made that initial investment in 2015, and kind of just talk about maybe how the numbers work out, and maybe any problems or any hiccups or trials that have come along during those 4 years of being
Got you. It's funny when you say hiccups or problems, because I've had a few. I don't even think you know about all of these, to be honest with you. It's funny. So we got the property in 2015. The beautiful part about getting a 3-family unit is that, like I said, the first 2 tenants actually paid my rent. The average rents in the area that we purchased in were probably between $1,200 and $1,500 a month per floor.
Yes.
So, with each tenant paying roughly $1,250 a floor, and my overall mortgage being $2,500 a month, those first 2 tenants completely wiped out my mortgage.
Nice.
And then essentially the money I would be spending on my own rent, I was saving. So I pocketed that money as if it were rental income coming into me. Right. So if you break this out into 3 pieces, which is what I like to do, I've got the rental income as one stream. I've got the mortgage pay down as another stream. And then I've got the appreciation as kind of the third piece to the pie. So in 2015, my house was worth $350,000. In 2016, just by living in the house, I had already made back my $12,500 initial investment in savings.
Nice.
Right? So now, if you think about it, my ROI is infinity because I've paid myself back already. So that was what happens in year 1, right? But on top of that, the tenants that are in the property are paying down my mortgage, and I think an average appreciation is about 3% a year. And the good thing is my house was trending right at average, a little bit above it. But if you fast forward over the course of a 3 to 4 year period, now in just cash flow, and I've actually moved out of that property. But see, that's the beauty of it. You buy it with the idea that even if you don't live there, it's still a cash flowing property.
Yes.
So, from the time I got it to now, whether that's through savings or through cash flow from the third tenant that now lives there, I've accumulated probably $35,000 to $40,000 in just rental income.
Nice.
Right? So that's one piece of the pie. The other piece is my mortgage has been paid down from $350,000 when I first purchased the property to now I owe about 315. Well, let's say 320 to make the numbers work.
Mm-hmm.
So $320,000 is the mortgage amount that I owe now. And because my property has been appreciating 3% to 4% every single year, that buildup has made the property increase in value from 350,000 to probably 390 to 400,000.
Yes.
And we do a lot of work in the area, so I know most houses that are similar to mine are appraising for around 400 to 415 actually.
Yes.
But just conservatively, let's say I'm at 400. Now I've made $50,000 in appreciation. I've made $30,000 in rental income, and I've made $20,000 in $20,000 to $30,000 in mortgage paid down. So if I sold the property today, even given some of the minor expenses I've had here and there, I would actually be selling the property 3 years later, or 4 years later now, with at least a $100K upside to my net worth.
Yes.
All from a $12,500 initial investment.
And that's crazy, man, because I think that's huge, because you touched on 3 points. And some people may say, why would you take a student loan payment and use that to invest in a property? I mean, you just talked about 3 ways. Like, you've made that money, that initial investment down payment back within the first year of money that you saved on rent. Not to mention during this time, you've gotten cash flow since then that's tripled that initial investment. The equity on the property has increased. That's tripled that, as well as the mortgage has gotten paid off, not by money from your pocket, but by the tenants living there.
Exactly.
So, you may think sure, you probably could have used that money at the time, the student loan payment or the investment that you put in. But honestly, you got by without it, and you may do without it. And honestly, if you would just use that money instead of investing it into a property, you wouldn't have had a clue where it was at. I mean, it probably would have been bought on food, traveling clothes, or something like that.
Easily.
Yeah, with no return on investment.
Before it went.
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly. No, man. I mean, and this stuff is so powerful, bro. Like, I wouldn't believe that it was true if I weren't doing it. And especially because I read about this stuff in all these real estate books, and and you think that it's some far off concept, and then you do it one time, and you're amazed at how efficient the process can work. And that doesn't mean that there aren't hiccups along the way, and we'll talk about those, because I always like to be transparent with people.
Exactly.
This investment thing is a real asset, and that's what I love about it, right? So with stocks, if the CEO is doing something shady, instantly you can lose money overnight when people find out about it, right?
Exactly.
Because it's all based on speculation. And the government or the banks aren't going to lend you money to purchase stock. You can buy stuff on margin, but that still is way different, and it's way riskier.
Yes.
With a physical asset, you've got something that is tangible. With tangible things, you do always run a certain risk as well.
Yes.
So one funny story that happened with my property is the second floor tenant, her son actually set the house on fire.
Oh, wow. No, I don't think you told me this story.
I didn't tell you that one. Okay, so I wasn't living there at the time. I had already moved out, but I think she had to say he was like 16, 17, something like that. And yeah, I mean, we don't know exactly what happened. Is one story against another, but he essentially set the part of the backyard or the back gazebo area on fire because he was smoking, trying to put his cigarette out, and it didn't go out all the way. And it ended up burning the back stairway. They had fire damage in their actual apartment on the second floor.
Man.
It was bad. So I get the call from the second floor tenant, and she's like, I don't even know how to tell you this, but your house is on fire.
which probably wasn't funny at the time. It's like, what?
Oh man! And the thing is, I actually have a property manager, which I think is a really good idea. Also, to make sure any property you get, you bake in enough to pay for property management, especially if you're like a working professional, because free time is the reason why we get into real estate. So if you're a
Yes.
slave to it, then you're defeating the purpose. But she didn't even call a property manager. She called me directly to tell me that my house was on fire. And it's crazy. I mean, but that's another thing that can happen. Insurance was there. Insurance said, oh, you know what? This is covered in your policy. We'll fix it. We'll replace everything like it's brand new. And that's what happened. So I didn't lose any money.
Yeah.
So it could be a funny story.
Yes.
Like that, the beauty of it. And luckily nobody was hurt. You know, nothing like that happened. But stuff happens. And that's the thing. Is the risk worth the reward? In real estate, like perfect example. If you purchase something right, even if I had done all my numbers and it ended up being a bad deal, and that money that I thought I was going to make every single month in cash flow, I didn't make, right? So instead of making $1,000 or the $1,500 a month I thought I was going to make, I didn't make that for some reason because the rents weren't as strong or one of my tenants left or whatever happened. Well, over time, if you look at the actual numbers, I still would have come out on top. Let's say I didn't make any cash flow at all.
Yes.
Still would have come out on top because at the worst, I was breaking even and I was making gains and appreciation. But that's more of a bonus. Yes. So, you know, those are the things you have to weigh. Is the upside worth the risk? And that, to me, was worth the potential call in the middle of the afternoon while you're about to walk into a business meeting saying that your house is on fire.
Yeah, definitely. I'm glad you shared that story, but definitely even how unfortunate that story was, and thank God nobody got hurt.
Thank God nobody got hurt, but that's what you get insurance.
Yeah, it still worked out to be a pretty good deal for you, and you know, I think that's cool, and Jerene, I appreciate you coming on because I think like a lot of my listeners, and you know, a lot of what I want to do is like, you know, we're talking about getting me into a deal this year by the end of the year, maybe one at least, possibly two if possible, deals by the end of this year. So I definitely think it's good to, you know, if you're thinking about getting into real estate investing, I definitely think Jerene dropped some knowledge here. He's provided a, you know, ton of value on here, and it's like, you know, you may be hearing this stuff for the first time. I you know, suggest and I encourage you to continue to, you know, educate yourself, go find more stuff that, you know, gives you more knowledge into it. And I just wanted to bring Jerene on so you guys can see a firsthand story of someone who's, you know, taking a chance or taking that leap to jump into real estate investment and how it's worked out for them. And I know you still got, you know, properties and deals that you're working with. We're actually involved on a deal, not a deal for investment, but you know, we're involved in a deal together where we both put up money into another deal with someone's working on a property and we get a certain percentage back. That's another way to get into investing as well. So I definitely appreciate your knowledge, and I definitely appreciate you taking the time to hop on here onto the podcast and just share it with the listeners and share it with my audience.
No problem, man. Thanks for having me anytime. If you guys want to reach me, you can email me directly. I answer all emails. I'm not as active on social yet. Lewis is going to get me active.
I'm trying to get him. I'm trying to get
me active, man. Hey, I didn't take the country out of me when I left. And so I'm still one step away from being on the typewriter, but I'm trying to get more active on social. But if you need to reach me, you know, you can contact Lewis and he'll give you my information on some of the other platforms. But you can also email me at JereneMakia@gmail.com. And I'll always be there. Hopefully we can drop that in the show notes. And
awesome. Yeah, I'll definitely put that in the show notes. And also, I almost forgot one thing. So we're actually been working on this for about a half year now. We're working on actually an application with another friend or partner of ours. It's called House Q. So if you guys are interested in, real estate investing, and you guys are interested in understanding how the numbers work for a first-time investor, we're working on an actual application, which you can go get from the iTunes store and Google Play store if you have Android right now. It's just a basic repair application that we have on there now, but we're working on enhancing it and building this thing out. So it's in the very rough stages right now. So it's in the beta stages right now. So if you go check it out, let us know, send me a message, get in touch with Jerene. We definitely love to get you guys to check it out and get your feedback. This is for anyone who's looking to get into real estate investing. You can use our calculators, or if you're already a real estate investor, you can definitely use it. We can appreciate that. We appreciate that feedback as well.
Definitely. Awesome, man. Anytime, bro. And that deal is actually going pretty well too. I'll tell you some more about that, but we're at the finish line. So
awesome.
Thanks for having me, man. I appreciate it. Anything I can do to help, I'm always here.
I appreciate it, man. We're definitely going to have you. I definitely want to get you on some more future podcasts. And, thank you for taking the time. And, Jerene's my first official guest on the podcast. So we're going to be dropping more. If you guys want to get in touch with him, definitely I'll drop his email in the show notes. And until then, if you guys have not liked the podcast or subscribed to the podcast, please go subscribe, leave me a review, definitely leave some feedback. That's how I get it out there. Again, I don't get paid anything to do this podcast. I go, provide this information, get these people on to provide value to you guys. So the way you can return the favor to me is just share it with someone you think may benefit or get value out of the podcast. I will see you all on the next podcast. Jerene, thank you again, bro. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Have a good one.
All right, man.
Peace.